Union Station, rush hour. Keisha is racing to catch the last train to her dream job interview. Then she sees him, an elderly man collapsed on a bench, clutching his chest, gasping for air. People walk past like he doesn't exist. Keisha stops. Her train is leaving in 30 seconds. This interview could save her family from poverty. Miss it, and there's no second chance. The old man looks up at her with desperate eyes. "Please, help me." Without thinking, Keisha drops her bag and runs to him. She calls 911, stays with him as her train disappears, rides with him to the hospital. What she didn't know was that this dying stranger was worth $50 billion, that saving his life would change hers forever, that walking away from her dream job would lead to something far bigger than she ever imagined. But in that moment, only one thing mattered: doing what's right. Who was this mysterious man who would transform her world? What Keisha didn't know was that this ordinary Tuesday would test everything she believed about doing the right thing. 4:30 a.m. The alarm screamed in the darkness of Keisha Williams's tiny apartment. She rolled out of bed, careful not to wake her younger brother Jamal sleeping on the couch. The floorboards creaked under her feet as she tiptoed to the bathroom. In the mirror, exhaustion stared back at her. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of someone working 2 jobs just to survive. But Keisha forced a smile. Today was different. Today could change everything. By 5:15, she was walking through the empty streets to Murphy's Diner. The morning air was crisp, and the city was just beginning to wake up. Keisha pushed through the glass door, the familiar bell jingling above her head. "Morning, sunshine," called out Eddie, the cook, already prepping for the breakfast rush. "Morning, Eddie." Keisha tied her apron and grabbed the coffee pot. For the next 6 hours, she would smile, serve, and collect whatever tips people were willing to spare. The breakfast crowd at Murphy's wasn't exactly generous. Construction workers grabbed quick coffee and toast. Office workers rushed through with their phones glued to their ears. By 11 a.m., when her shift ended, Keisha counted her tips: $23.47. She stared at the crumpled bills in her palm. Rent was due in 3 days. Utilities needed to be paid. And Jamal was waiting for money to buy his textbooks. $23 for 6 hours of work. Keisha felt that familiar knot in her stomach, the one that never quite went away. No matter how hard she worked, it never seemed like enough. She was always one emergency away from disaster. Walking home, she passed the towering glass building that dominated the downtown skyline, Pemberton Technologies. She'd walked past it 1,000 times, watching well-dressed people stride confidently through its revolving doors. They looked like they belonged to a different world. A world where $23 wasn't the difference between eating and going hungry. Back at the apartment, Jamal was hunched over his laptop at their tiny kitchen table. Textbooks were scattered around him, borrowed, outdated copies that he'd managed to find online. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. "Good." Keisha forced brightness into her voice. "What are you working on?" "Chemistry. Got a big test next week." Jamal finally looked up, and Keisha saw her mother's eyes staring back at her. The same determination, the same hope that tomorrow would be better than today. Their parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago. Since then, it had been just the two of them. Keisha had dropped out of community college to work full-time. Jamal's education became her mission. "I found that scholarship I told you about," Jamal said, excitement creeping into his voice. "The application is due Friday." "But I need to buy a suit for the interview." Keisha's heart sank. A suit. Of course. Everything required money they didn't have. "How much?" she asked. "I found one at the thrift store for $40. I know it's a lot, but we'll figure it out." The words came out automatically, even though she had no idea how. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Keisha Williams?" "Yes." "This is Jennifer from PT Industries. We received your application for the receptionist position. Are you available for an interview today at 3 p.m.? Keisha's heart stopped. PT Industries. She'd applied 3 weeks ago and assumed they'd forgotten about her. Yes, absolutely, I'll be there. Excellent. The address is 1247 Corporate Plaza. Please bring a copy of your resume and arrive 15 minutes early. After hanging up, Keisha stared at her phone in disbelief. This was it. This was her chance. The receptionist position paid $45,000 a year, with benefits, health insurance, paid vacation. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of making. Jamal looked up from his books. What was that about? I got an interview. Today, at PT Industries. PT Industries? Keisha, that's huge. They're like one of the biggest companies in the city. I know. She was already calculating in her head. $45,000 a year meant Jamal could get his suit. They could move to a better apartment, maybe even one where he wouldn't have to sleep on the couch. But first, she had to get there. Keisha opened her wallet and counted her money. $23.47 from tips, plus $8 she'd saved from last week. $31.47 to her name. The train ticket to downtown cost $15 round trip. She'd need money for lunch since she hadn't eaten since yesterday. And if she got the job, she'd need to come back tomorrow with better clothes. She looked at Jamal, bent over his chemistry homework with borrowed textbooks and a second-hand calculator. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd sacrificed since their parents died, came down to this moment. This interview wasn't just about a job. It was about proving that all the 16-hour days, all the nights going to bed hungry so Jamal could eat, all the dreams deferred, it was all worth something. Keisha grabbed her purse and the carefully printed resume she'd prepared weeks ago. She straightened her shoulders and headed for the door. Wish me luck, she called to Jamal. You don't need luck, sis. You've got this. As she walked toward the train station, Keisha allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where money wasn't a constant worry, where Jamal could focus on his studies instead of working part-time at the grocery store, where she could be proud of what she did for a living. But she had no idea that everything she thought she knew about luck was about to change forever. The old man's confusion was about to cost Keisha everything she'd worked for. Union Station buzzed with afternoon energy. Commuters rushed past with purposeful strides, everyone focused on their own destination. Keisha clutched her resume folder and checked her phone. 2:45 p.m. Perfect. The 2:15 train would get her downtown with 15 minutes to spare. She'd spent her last $8 on the train ticket, leaving her with $23.47. Enough for a small coffee after the interview, maybe a granola bar if she was lucky. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday's leftover toast from the diner. But none of that mattered now. This interview would change everything. As she approached the platform, dark clouds rolled across the sky. The weather forecast hadn't mentioned rain, but Chicago weather was unpredictable. A few drops hit her forehead, then more. Within seconds, the drops became a downpour. People scattered, running for cover under the station's overhangs. Keisha pulled her thin jacket tighter and hurried toward the boarding area. The train was already at the platform, passengers filing through the doors. That's when she saw him. An elderly white man sat alone on a wooden bench, completely still while chaos erupted around him. Rain soaked through his expensive-looking wool coat, but he didn't seem to notice. His silver hair was plastered to his head, and his hands gripped an old leather portfolio with embossed initials. HP. Something was wrong. Keisha slowed her pace, watching him carefully. The man's eyes were unfocused, staring straight ahead but not seeing anything. His lips moved silently, as if he was trying to remember something important. All aboard! Final call for the 2:15 Downtown Express. Keisha's head snapped toward the train. The conductor was already closing the doors. She had maybe 30 seconds before it pulled away. The old man tried to stand, swaying dangerously. His face had gone pale, almost gray. He pressed his hand to his chest, his breathing shallow and labored. "Sir," Keisha called out, but her voice was lost in the noise of the station. 20 seconds. The man's hand clutched tighter at his chest. His eyes found Keisha's across the platform, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. Pure terror. He was trying to speak, but no words came out. 15 seconds. "Please!" The word barely escaped his lips, but Keisha heard it. "Help me!" 10 seconds. Everything slowed down. Keisha looked at the train, its doors still open, waiting. She looked at the old man, now gripping the bench as if it was the only thing keeping him upright. His breathing was becoming more erratic, more desperate. The interview. $45,000. Jamal's future. Everything they'd worked for. 5 seconds. The conductor raised his hand to signal departure. Keisha dropped her resume folder and ran toward the bench. "Sir! Sir! Stay with me!" She knelt beside him as the train pulled away behind her, taking her dreams with it. Up close, she could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool rain. His expensive watch and perfectly tailored clothes suggested wealth, but right now he looked like any vulnerable person in need. "My chest," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Can't breathe properly." Keisha's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling for help." "Just stay calm, okay?" 911, what's your emergency?" "I'm at Union Station." "There's an elderly man having chest pains. He's conscious but struggling to breathe. We need an ambulance right away." While she spoke to the dispatcher, Keisha loosened the man's tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt. His skin was clammy, his pulse rapid but weak. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Harold," he managed. "Harold. I can't remember. I was supposed to meet someone." "It's okay, Harold. Help is coming. I'm Keisha. I'm not going anywhere." Harold's grip on the portfolio tightened. Despite his confusion, his posture remained impeccable, the bearing of someone accustomed to authority and respect. When he spoke, even through his distress, his words carried the educated cadence of someone who'd spent decades in boardrooms. "The meeting." Harold's eyes darted toward the downtown skyline, where glass towers stretched toward storm clouds. "They're waiting for me. Important." Keisha followed his gaze. Among the buildings, one stood taller than the rest. The same Pemberton Technologies tower she passed every day walking to work. But Harold's attention seemed drawn to that specific direction, his confusion mixed with what looked like urgency. "Don't worry about any meeting right now," Keisha said. "Just focus on breathing." In the distance, sirens wailed. The ambulance was coming, but Harold's condition seemed to be worsening. His face had taken on an ashen color, and his grip on her hand was weakening. "Please, don't leave me alone," he whispered. Keisha's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Probably PT Industries wondering where she was. Her interview was supposed to start in 10 minutes. She could still make it if she left right now, if she just waited for the paramedics and then ran. But looking at Harold's frightened eyes, she knew there was only one choice she could live with. She declined the call and squeezed Harold's hand tighter. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. What Keisha didn't know was that her decision to stay would set in motion events that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Because Harold wasn't just any confused old man caught in the rain. He was about to become the most important person she'd ever helped. As Keisha helped the stranger, she had no idea she was being watched. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their red and blue lights cutting through the gray afternoon. 2 EMTs rushed toward them with a stretcher and medical equipment. "What's the situation?" asked the lead paramedic, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes. "Chest pains, difficulty breathing, confusion," Keisha reported quickly. "His name is Harold. He was disoriented when I found him." Harold clutched Keisha's hand as the paramedics began their assessment. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone in distress. "Harold, I'm Sarah. We're going to take good care of you," the paramedic said, wrapping a blood pressure cuff around his arm. "Can you tell me your last name?" Harold's eyes darted between the paramedics and Keisha, panic flickering across his face. I don't... The meeting... It's okay," Keisha said softly. "Just focus on getting better." "Blood pressure's elevated but stable," Sarah announced to her partner. "Pulse is rapid. We need to get him to the hospital for an EKG." As they prepared to transfer Harold to the stretcher, he refused to let go of Keisha's hand. "Please," he whispered, "don't leave me." Keisha looked at the paramedics. "Can I ride with him? Are you family?" "No, but he doesn't seem to have anyone else." Sarah nodded. "Come on." As they loaded Harold into the ambulance, Keisha's phone rang again. PT Industries. She stared at the screen, knowing exactly what this call meant. They were wondering where she was. The interview slot would be given to someone else. Her one chance was slipping away with every passing minute. She declined the call and climbed into the ambulance. The ride to Chicago General Hospital was a blur of medical equipment and Harold's labored breathing. Keisha held his hand while the paramedics worked, monitoring his vitals and administering oxygen. "Stay with me, Harold," she kept repeating. "You're going to be okay." Through the ambulance window, she watched the city pass by. Somewhere in those glass towers, her interview was happening without her. Someone else was sitting in that chair, answering questions about their qualifications, their availability, their dreams. But looking at Harold's frightened face, Keisha knew she'd made the right choice. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Harold was whisked into the emergency room while Keisha waited in a plastic chair that had seen better days. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. She pulled out her phone and stared at the missed calls from PT Industries. 3 now. She should call them back, explain what happened, and ask for another chance. But what would she say? That she'd chosen to help a stranger instead of showing up to the most important interview of her life? An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a doctor emerged from the emergency room. "Are you here with Harold?" "Yes, is he okay?" "He's stable." It appears he had an anxiety-induced cardiac episode, complicated by dehydration and what seems to be a reaction to new medication. His memory is returning, and his vitals have improved significantly. Relief flooded through Keisha. "Can I see him?" "He's been asking for you." Harold looked much better when she entered his room. Color had returned to his cheeks, and his eyes were clearer. He was sitting up in bed, no longer clutching his chest. "There's my guardian angel," he said, his voice stronger now. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you." Harold studied her face carefully. "You saved my life, you know. If you hadn't stopped, anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Harold said firmly. "They wouldn't have. I watched dozens of people walk past me like I was invisible. But you stopped. You sacrificed something important to help a stranger." Keisha shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what was right." "What was so important that you almost didn't stop?" The question hung in the air. Keisha looked down at her hands, still clutching the now soggy resume folder. "A job interview," she admitted, "for a receptionist position. It would have changed everything for my family." Harold's expression grew serious. "Would you have?" "I missed it. They were probably expecting me 2 hours ago." "What company?" "PT Industries. I know it's not much, but the salary was more than I've ever made, and my brother needs—" "PT Industries?" Harold interrupted, sitting up straighter. "You know it?" Before Harold could answer, the door opened and a well-dressed man in his 40s hurried in. He had Harold's same piercing blue eyes and carried himself with obvious confidence. "Dad? Thank God you're okay. When your driver called and said you never showed up." "David," Harold said, relief evident in his voice. "I'm fine. This young woman saved my life." David turned to Keisha with genuine gratitude. "I can't thank you enough. When Dad didn't arrive for the board meeting, we were worried sick. His new heart medication has been causing some confusion. Board meeting." Keisha's mind raced. Harold had been heading to a board meeting when he got lost and confused. "The Pemberton deal," Harold said suddenly, his memory clearly returning. "We were supposed to finalize the merger today." "It's handled, Dad. We postponed everything when we couldn't find you." Pemberton. The name hit Keisha like a lightning bolt. She'd heard it before, seen it every day on her walk to work. "Pemberton?" she asked hesitantly. "Pemberton Technologies," David explained. "Dad founded the company 50 years ago. He's chairman emeritus now, but he still oversees major decisions." The room seemed to spin. Pemberton Technologies, the building she walked past every day, the company where she'd dreamed of working someday, never imagining she could aim higher than the receptionist desk. Harold was studying her reaction carefully. "You mentioned PT Industries for your interview." "Yes, but PT Industries is our subsidiary," Harold said gently. "Part of Pemberton Technologies." Keisha felt like she couldn't breathe. She'd saved the founder of the very company where she'd been supposed to interview, the man whose building dominated the skyline, whose name was on plaques throughout the city, had been sitting alone and scared on a bench, and she'd chosen to help him instead of pursuing her own dreams. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Of course you didn't," Harold said, "which makes what you did even more remarkable." David stepped forward. "What's your name?" "Keisha. Keisha Williams." "Keisha," Harold said thoughtfully, "do you have somewhere you need to be? Because I'd very much like to thank you properly." Keisha thought about her empty apartment, about Jamal waiting to hear how the interview went, about the $23 in her purse and the rent due in 3 days. "No," she said, "I don't have anywhere to be." Harold smiled, and for the first time since she'd found him on that bench, Keisha saw a glimpse of the powerful businessman he must have been. "Good," he said, "because this conversation is just getting started." What neither Keisha nor Harold realized was that someone had been recording the entire rescue on their phone. The video of a young woman choosing to help a stranger instead of pursuing her own opportunities was already making its way across social media. Sometimes the most important moments of our lives happen when we think no one is watching. Harold's simple gesture would soon reveal a secret that would shock everyone. The hospital room fell quiet as the weight of the revelation settled over them. Keisha stared at Harold, trying to process what she'd just learned. This wasn't just any confused elderly man. This was Harold Pemberton, the founder of one of Chicago's most powerful companies. And she'd chosen to save his life instead of pursuing her dream job at his company. "Keisha," Harold said gently, "I want to do something for you. You've given me far more than medical assistance today." "You don't need to do anything," she replied quickly. "I'm just glad you're okay." Harold reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. "At least let me pay for your cab ride home, and for missing your interview." "No." Keisha's response was immediate and firm. "I don't need payment for doing what's right." David stepped forward. "Miss Williams, you have no idea what you've done for our family. My father could have died alone on that bench," Harold finished quietly. "Keisha, please, let us at least cover your expenses." Keisha shook her head. "Mr. Pemberton, I didn't help you because I expected something in return. I helped you because you needed help. That's what people should do for each other." Harold exchanged a meaningful glance with his son. In 50 years of business, he'd encountered countless people who saw dollar signs when they looked at him. Politicians seeking donations, employees angling for promotions, business partners calculate their advantage. But here was someone who'd literally saved his life and refused to accept even cab fare. "At least take my business card," Harold insisted, pulling an elegant card from his wallet. "In case you ever need anything. And I mean anything." Keisha hesitated. "I really don't need—" "Please," Harold said. "It would make me feel better knowing you have it." Reluctantly, Keisha accepted the card. It was heavy stock paper with embossed lettering. Harold Pemberton, Chairman Emeritus, Pemberton Technologies. Below his name was a direct phone number and email address. "Thank you," she said, tucking it into her purse without really looking at it. Harold studied her carefully. "Tell me about yourself, Keisha. What do you do?" "I work at Murphy's Diner in the mornings, and I clean offices at night." She paused, then added quietly, "I'm trying to save money for my younger brother's education." "And the interview today was for?" "A receptionist position at PT Industries." Keisha's voice carried a note of loss. "It would have paid more than both my jobs combined." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "Where do you work these cleaning jobs?" "Different buildings downtown. Mostly the business district." She gestured toward the window, where the Pemberton Technologies building was visible in the distance. "Actually, I walk past your building every day going to work. I've always wondered what it would be like to work somewhere like that instead of just cleaning up after the people who do." The honesty in her voice struck Harold deeply. Here was someone who'd walked past his building every day, dreaming of a better life. And when given the chance to pursue that dream, she'd chosen to help a stranger instead. "You said your brother is in college." "Community college. He's studying chemistry. He's so smart, Mr. Pemberton. Smarter than anyone I know. But we can't afford a 4-year university, and scholarships are—" Keisha trailed off, realizing she was sharing too much. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear about our problems." "I want to hear," Harold said simply. "Tell me about him." For the next few minutes, Keisha found herself opening up about Jamal, about their parents' death, about dropping out of school to support him, about his dreams of becoming a chemist, and her determination to make sure he got that chance. Harold listened intently, occasionally asking questions. David watched his father with growing recognition. This was the same focused attention Harold had once given to evaluating business investments. When Keisha finished, Harold was quiet for a long moment. "You're remarkable," he said finally. "Not many people would sacrifice their own education for someone else's dreams." "He's my brother," Keisha said simply. "It's what family does." Harold reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "Keisha, I want you to remember something. You didn't help Harold Pemberton, the businessman, today. You helped Harold, a confused and scared old man who needed kindness. The fact that I happen to run a company doesn't change the purity of what you did." Keisha felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for saying that. I mean every word." Harold released her hand and settled back against his pillows. "Now I'm sure you need to get home. Your brother is probably worried." Keisha nodded and stood to leave. "I'm really glad you're okay, Mr. Pemberton." "Harold," he corrected with a smile. "And Keisha? Keep that business card close. You never know when life might surprise you." As Keisha walked toward the door, she had no idea that Harold was already forming a plan that would change everything, or that the simple business card in her purse was about to become the key to a future she'd never dared imagine. The business card in Keisha's purse was about to change everything. The taxi ride home cost $25. Keisha watched the meter climb with growing anxiety, knowing it represented 2 days' worth of meals. But Harold's son David had insisted on arranging the ride despite her protests. As the Chicago skyline faded behind her, Keisha felt the full weight of what had happened. She'd saved a man's life. That felt right. But she'd also thrown away her family's future in the process. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jamal. "How did the interview go?" Keisha stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How do you explain that you chose to help a stranger instead of securing your family's financial future? She typed, "I'll tell you when I get home." Back at their cramped apartment, Jamal was waiting at the kitchen table, chemistry books spread around him. His face lit up when she walked in. "So? Did you get it?" Keisha sat down heavily. "I didn't make it to the interview." Jamal's expression fell. "What happened?" "There was an emergency. An old man at the station was having chest pains. I had to help him." "Is he okay?" "He's fine. But I missed the interview. They probably gave the job to someone else." Jamal reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing, sis. There'll be other jobs." His faith in her made Keisha's heart ache. If only he knew how rare opportunities like this were. Later that evening, while doing laundry, Keisha finally pulled Harold's business card from her purse. She'd been too overwhelmed to really look at it in the hospital. Harold Pemberton, Chairman Emeritus, Pemberton Technologies. Pemberton. The name rang a bell, but she couldn't place it. She pulled out her phone and tried to Google the company, but their building's internet connection made the page load slowly. What she could see made her pause. Pemberton Technologies wasn't just any company. It was massive. The search results showed a gleaming headquarters building that looked familiar. Very familiar. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Keisha called to her elderly neighbor folding clothes nearby. "Do you know anything about Pemberton Technologies?" Mrs. Rodriguez looked up. "Mija, that's the big company downtown. They employ like half the city. The old man who started it is worth hundreds of millions." Keisha's hands trembled as she looked at the business card again. Chairman Emeritus meant he'd founded the company. And if Mrs. Rodriguez was right about the wealth. She thought about Harold's expensive clothes, his son's confident demeanor, the way they'd spoken about board meetings and major deals. Walking back upstairs, Keisha passed the window facing downtown. In the distance, lit against the night sky, stood the Pemberton Technologies building. The same building she walked past every single day. The same building where she'd been supposed to interview at PT Industries. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Keisha, this is Harold. I hope you made it home safely. Sleep well. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day." Who exactly had she saved today? Walking into that building, Keisha had no idea her life was about to change forever. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Keisha had barely slept, Harold's cryptic text replaying in her mind. She'd spent the night researching Pemberton Technologies, piecing together fragments through their weak internet. What she'd found was staggering. Pemberton Technologies wasn't just large, it was an empire. Founded in 1952, it had grown from a small engineering firm into a multi-billion-dollar corporation with offices worldwide. And at the center was Harold Pemberton, the man she'd saved. At 10 a.m., her phone rang. "Keisha? This is Jennifer from PT Industries. I'm calling about your missed interview yesterday." Keisha's heart sank. Here comes the rejection. "Yes, I'm so sorry. There was a medical emergency. Actually, we'd like to reschedule. Are you available today at 2 p.m.? Keisha nearly dropped the phone. "Today?" "Yes, absolutely." "Wonderful. Same address, 1247 Corporate Plaza." After hanging up, Keisha stared at her phone in disbelief. They were giving her another chance. Maybe Harold had somehow put in a good word. By 1:30 p.m., Keisha stood outside the gleaming tower that housed Pemberton Technologies. She'd walked past this building thousands of times, but never been inside. The lobby was impressive. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, an atmosphere of quiet power. And then she saw them. Covering one wall were portraits of the company's history. Founders, CEOs, major milestones. But it was the largest portrait that made her blood run cold. Harold Pemberton, founder, 1952 to 2019, chairman emeritus. There he was, the same kind eyes, silver hair, gentle smile she'd seen in the hospital bed. But in this portrait, he wore the confident expression of someone who'd built an empire. Keisha gripped the reception desk for support as the magnitude hit her. She hadn't just saved any confused old man. She'd saved Harold Pemberton, the founder of one of Chicago's most powerful companies. Miss Williams? Keisha turned to see Jennifer approaching with a warm smile. I'm glad you could make it. How are you feeling after yesterday's emergency? I'm fine, Keisha managed, still staring at Harold's portrait. That's our founder, Jennifer said, following her gaze. Remarkable man. Built this company from a one-room office. He still comes in occasionally. He seems familiar, Keisha said weakly. Let's head upstairs. I think you'll find today's process different than usual. They took the elevator to the 15th floor, but instead of a conference room, Jennifer led her toward a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. There's been a change, Jennifer explained. Someone specifically requested to meet with you. She opened the door, and Keisha's world tilted. Harold Pemberton sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, looking healthy and confident in an impeccable suit. His son David stood beside him, smiling warmly. There's my guardian angel, Harold said, rising from his chair. Jennifer looked confused. I'm sorry, do you two know each other? Do you know each other? Harold chuckled. Jennifer, meet Keisha Williams, the remarkable young woman who saved my life yesterday. The words hung in the air like thunder. Jennifer's eyes widened. You're the one who helped Mr. Pemberton? But how? At Union Station, Keisha said quietly, when he was having chest pains. Chest pains caused by stress and my new heart medication, Harold explained. I'd been walking to clear my head before our board meeting about the Morrison Industries merger. The medication made me disoriented, and stress from the $500 million deal triggered what doctors called an anxiety-induced cardiac episode. David stepped forward. Dad was carrying the final merger documents when Keisha found him. If he'd collapsed alone, we could have lost the biggest acquisition in our company's history. The room spun. $500 million. She'd helped save a deal worth $500 million. But more importantly, Harold continued, Keisha didn't know any of this when she stopped to help. She saw a confused, scared old man having chest pains, and she sacrificed her job interview to make sure I was safe. Your job interview. Jennifer's voice trailed off. The interview you missed yesterday was supposed to be here, at PT Industries. Which is our subsidiary, Harold confirmed. Keisha was rushing to interview for a receptionist position at the very company I founded. She gave up her chance at working here to save my life, not knowing who I was. The irony was overwhelming. Keisha had sacrificed her dream of working at Pemberton Technologies to save the man who'd built the company. She'd chosen kindness over opportunity, humanity over advancement, and she had no idea. I need to sit down, Keisha whispered. Harold guided her to a chair, his expression gentle but serious. Keisha, yesterday when I was confused and scared, you didn't see Harold Pemberton, the businessman. You saw Harold, a person who needed help. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. I still can't believe you're really him, the founder. I am. And you're about to discover that sometimes the universe rewards people who choose to do the right thing. Harold returned to his desk and picked up a folder. Jennifer, would you mind giving us privacy? Keisha and I have important matters to discuss. As Jennifer left, Harold's expression became more serious. Now then, he said, settling back in his chair. Let's talk about your future. But Harold's offer was bigger than Keisha ever imagined possible. Harold opened the folder on his desk and studied its contents for a moment. The silence in the room was deafening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Keisha could see the city sprawling below, a world of opportunity that had always seemed just out of reach. Keisha, Harold began, his voice carrying the weight of decades in business. In 50 years of running this company, I've learned that the most important decisions aren't about profit margins or market share. They're about recognizing character when you see it. He leaned forward, his eyes intense but kind. Yesterday, you made a choice that revealed everything I need to know about who you are. You didn't help Harold Pemberton, the CEO. You helped Harold, a confused old man who was scared and alone. That kind of authenticity is rarer than you might think. Keisha's hands trembled in her lap. Mr. Pemberton, I appreciate everything you're saying, but I really just did what anyone should do. That's exactly my point, Harold smiled. You don't even realize how extraordinary you are, which brings me to why you're here. He closed the folder and looked directly at her. I'm not offering you the receptionist position. Keisha's heart sank. After everything, after all the kindness and gratitude, she was still going to be turned away. She started to stand. I'm offering you something much better, Harold continued, gesturing for her to sit back down. David stepped forward with a new folder, much thicker than the first. Keisha, how would you feel about becoming my father's personal executive assistant? The words didn't compute. I'm sorry, what? Harold chuckled. It's a real position. I may be chairman emeritus, but I still oversee major strategic decisions, community outreach programs, philanthropic initiatives. I need someone I can trust completely, someone who sees people, not positions. But I don't have experience in... Experience can be taught, Harold interrupted. Character cannot. And you've already proven you have something far more valuable than experience. You have integrity. David opened the new folder and slid it across the desk. The starting salary would be $85,000 annually, with full benefits including health, dental, and vision insurance. Keisha stared at the number on the paper. $85,000. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of making, more than double what the receptionist position would have paid. There's more, Harold said gently. I understand you have a younger brother in college. Yes, but how did you... You told me about him yesterday, about how brilliant he is, about your sacrifices to support his education. Harold's expression grew warm. I'd like to establish a full scholarship for Jamal through our Pemberton Foundation. 4 years at any university he chooses, plus graduate school if he wants it. Keisha felt the room spinning. That's impossible. Scholarships like that are worth... Approximately $200,000, David confirmed. More if he pursues a doctorate in chemistry as you mentioned he wants to. Tears began streaming down Keisha's face. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Harold stood up and walked around his desk, sitting in the chair next to her instead of behind the imposing mahogany barrier. Keisha, let me tell you something about wealth. Money doesn't make you happy. Purpose does. And yesterday, you reminded me what true purpose looks like. He paused, his voice growing more personal. I built this company from nothing. I've made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I haven't always been the man I wanted to be. I've made decisions based on profit instead of principle. I've walked past people who needed help because I was too focused on my next meeting. Harold looked out the window at the city below. But watching you yesterday, seeing someone choose kindness over opportunity, sacrifice over self-interest, it reminded me why I went into business in the first place, to make a difference, to build something that matters. He turned back to her, his eyes bright with conviction. I don't want an employee, Keisha. I want a partner. Someone who can help me ensure this company lives up to its potential to do good in the world. But I'm nobody, Keisha whispered. I clean office buildings and serve coffee. What could I possibly offer a company like this? You offer perspective that money can't buy, Harold said firmly. You understand what it means to struggle, to sacrifice, to put others before yourself. Those aren't weaknesses, Keisha. They're superpowers. David nodded in agreement. Some of our best innovations have come from understanding what real people actually need. Not what focus groups say they want, but what communities are missing. Harold pulled out another document. There's one more thing. I'd like to advance your first month's salary today. I imagine the transition to a new job comes with expenses, professional clothing, perhaps moving to a better apartment so your brother doesn't have to sleep on the couch. Keisha couldn't speak. The generosity was overwhelming, almost incomprehensible. Is this real? She managed to ask. It's real, Harold confirmed. But I need you to understand something important. I'm not doing this just because I'm grateful, though I am. I'm doing this because yesterday proved you're exactly the kind of person this company needs. He leaned forward, his expression serious. But here's the thing, Keisha. This offer comes with responsibility. I'm going to train you personally. You'll learn about business strategy, financial planning, and community development. It won't be easy. I'll expect excellence from you. I won't let you down, Keisha said, finding her voice. I know you won't. Because yesterday, when it mattered most, you already proved that you choose doing right over doing easy. Harold stood and extended his hand. So, Keisha Williams, are you ready to change your life? Through her tears, Keisha reached out and shook his hand. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I am. What neither of them knew was that this was just the beginning. The ripple effects of Keisha's kindness were about to transform not just her life, but the entire culture of one of Chicago's most powerful companies. But the changes Keisha brought to Pemberton Technologies surprised everyone. 6 months later, the transformation was undeniable. Keisha's cramped studio apartment had been replaced by a bright 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood. Jamal now had his own room, complete with a proper desk where he studied advanced chemistry at Northwestern University. The worn textbooks were gone, replaced by crisp new editions and a laptop that actually worked. Good morning, Mr. Pemberton, Keisha said, walking into Harold's office with his morning briefing. She wore a tailored navy blazer, professional, confident, but still unmistakably herself. How many times do I have to tell you to call me Harold? He replied with a smile. At least 1,000 more times, Keisha grinned back. Their partnership had evolved beyond what either expected. Harold had trained her personally in business strategy, financial planning, and corporate leadership. But Keisha brought something that surprised even Harold, a perspective that transformed how Pemberton Technologies operated. The quarterly Community Impact Report, Keisha announced, settling into her chair. Hit me with the numbers. The Keisha Williams Kindness Initiative has reached 847 people in 6 months, 53 full college scholarships awarded, 27 job training programs launched, and our employee volunteer program has logged over 10,000 hours of community service. Harold shook his head in amazement. When I hired you, I thought I was getting an assistant. Turns out I got a revolutionary. The Kindness Initiative had been Keisha's idea, born from understanding what struggling families actually needed. Not just money, but opportunity. Not just charity, but dignity. Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up story, Keisha continued. Our kindness-first corporate culture is making waves across the business community. The media attention had started small. A local news station had covered the story about Keisha saving Harold's life. But what made it newsworthy wasn't just the fairy tale aspect, it was what happened next. Harold had implemented Keisha's kindness-first policy. Employees could be late to meetings if they were helping someone in need. The company established partnerships with local schools, offering mentorship programs. They started hosting monthly community dinners. Remember when you used to take the bus to work? Harold asked. You mean 3 months ago? And now you're presenting million-dollar proposals to the board like you've been doing it for years. Harold's mentorship had unlocked abilities Keisha never knew she possessed. She had a natural talent for seeing connections others missed, for understanding what communities needed. Speaking of the board, Keisha said, I have news. They offered me a promotion, Director of Community Relations. And? I said yes. Harold's face broke into a proud smile. Outstanding. This company needs someone in leadership who actually understands the community we serve. The promotion was just the latest ripple effect. Jamal had been featured in Northwestern's newspaper as a scholarship success story. Murphy's Diner had landed an exclusive catering contract with Pemberton Technologies, securing Eddie's job and allowing him to hire 2 more employees. But perhaps the most significant change was in Harold himself. You know what's funny? He said, looking out at the city. I used to ride past bus stops in my town car, never thinking about the people waiting there. Now I take the train twice a week just to stay connected to real life. And how's that working out? Last week I helped a confused tourist find their hotel. Small thing, but it felt good. Really good. Kindness is contagious. Indeed. The Chicago Business Journal wants to do a cover story about our corporate culture transformation. They're calling it the Pemberton model and suggesting other companies adopt similar practices. Are other companies listening? 3 major corporations have reached out asking for consulting on kindness-based policies. Turns out treating people well is good for business. They both laughed, but Keisha felt deep satisfaction knowing her simple act had created a movement spreading beyond one company. Harold, she said quietly, do you ever think about that day at Union Station? Every morning when I wake up, he replied. Best day of my life. Even though you almost died? Especially because I almost died. It brought you into my life and reminded me who I wanted to be. Outside, Chicago bustled with its usual energy. But somewhere in that vast city, 53 scholarship recipients were attending classes they never thought they could afford. Hundreds of families had access to job training that would change their futures. Thousands of people had witnessed small acts of kindness that might inspire them to help someone else. All because one woman chose to miss her train. 2 years later, Keisha faced a moment that would complete the circle. Union Station, rush hour. The same platform where everything had changed. But this time, Keisha Williams, Director of Community Relations, was the one hurrying to catch a train. She checked her watch. 3:15 p.m. The board meeting had run long, but she could still make the 3:20 train to the community center where she was speaking to high school students about scholarships. As she rushed toward the platform, she noticed him immediately. An elderly Hispanic man sat hunched on the same wooden bench where she'd found Harold 2 years ago. He clutched a worn envelope, tears streaming down his face. His clothes were clean but old, and he kept looking around as if lost. Keisha slowed her pace. The train was boarding. 50 teenagers were waiting to hear about opportunities that could change their lives. But something about the man's posture made her stop. Sir? Are you okay? The man looked up with grateful eyes. My granddaughter, he said in accented English. She graduates today from nursing school, first in our family to finish college. But I can't find the auditorium. Keisha glanced at the envelope. Northwestern University. Nursing school graduation. What's your granddaughter's name? Maria Santos. She got a scholarship from a big company. Pemberton something. Keisha's heart stopped. Maria Santos. She remembered the application personally, a brilliant young woman whose grandfather worked 3 jobs until the Keisha Williams Kindness Initiative stepped in. Sir, Keisha said gently, I know exactly where you need to go. And I know Maria. She's extraordinary. The man's eyes lit up. You know my Maria? Keisha pulled out her phone and canceled her speaking engagement. Then she hailed a taxi. "Come on," she said, helping him to his feet. "Let's get you to your granddaughter's graduation." During the ride, she learned his name was Carlos, that he'd sacrificed everything to help Maria pursue her dreams, and that today represented decades of hope and hard work. At Northwestern, Keisha didn't just drop him off. She walked him to the auditorium, helped him find his seat, and stayed to watch Maria walk across the stage. As Maria's name was called, Carlos gripped Keisha's hand with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "not just for today, for making this possible." Later, catching a train back downtown, Keisha thought about the circular nature of kindness. 2 years ago, she'd missed her train to help a stranger. Today, she'd missed her appointment to help another. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harold. "Heard about what you did today. Some things never change, and thank God for that." The next morning, Harold announced a new policy. The Kindness First initiative would officially protect any employee who was late due to helping others. Because at Pemberton Technologies, they'd learned that the most important meetings aren't on your calendar. They're the ones that happen when someone needs help. One missed train, one act of kindness, one life changed forever. In a world that often feels divided, Keisha proved that kindness is the bridge that connects us all. She showed us that sometimes the most important choice isn't the one that advances our career. It's the one that honors our humanity. Harold was right when he said kindness is contagious. From one woman's decision to help a stranger, we saw ripple effects that transformed a company, launched 53 college careers, and created a movement that's spreading across corporate America. But here's the beautiful truth. This story isn't unique to Keisha. Every single day you have opportunities to change someone's life with simple acts of kindness. What if your next act of kindness changes everything? Have you ever helped a stranger? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story restored your faith in humanity, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove good people still exist. Because sometimes the person you help might just change your life too.